It is a distinctly modern dilemma, I think. This overwhelming, almost gravitational urge we all seem to have to just collect and acquire absolutely everything we find even mildly interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you are probably nodding along right now, thinking about your own life. Like you see a brilliantly designed lamp online and suddenly you just have to own it. Or you stumble across a fascinating article and you immediately bookmark it in a folder you will probably never, ever open again.
Right, the dreaded read later folder.
Exactly. Or you walk past a beautiful, intricate piece of pottery in a shop window, and your brain instantly starts trying to figure out like where it could fit in your living room. We are just a culture of gatherers, constantly trying to drag the outside world into our own personal spaces.
Yeah, and the science actually backs up that feeling.
Yeah.
Because what you were describing is a deeply ingrained evolutionary mechanism, but it's colliding with a modern world of infinite abundance.
But really, so it's biological.
Totally. For most of human history, surviving literally meant acquiring. If our ancestors found a resource, like berries or tools or shelter materials, their brains rewarded them with a massive dopamine hit for securing it.
Okay, so it was a survival advantage.
Precisely. That dopamine loop kept them alive. Today, obviously, the stakes are very different, but the neurochemistry is exactly the same. When you click save on that article or you buy that lamp, your brain gives you a chemical reward for acquiring a resource.
Wow, so I'm getting a survival reward for like hoarding internet tabs?
Yeah. The problem is the dopamine hit comes from the act of capturing it, right? Not from the actual long-term appreciation or the utility of the thing itself.
That makes so much sense. We get the chemical reward just for putting it in the cart, whether it's a physical shopping cart or a digital bookmark folder. And well, that instinct to hoard the beautiful and the interesting is what we are looking at today in this deep dive. But through a very specific and honestly delightfully unexpected lens.
It really is a fascinating source today.
It is. Our source material comes from a long-running gardening blog. Specifically, we are looking at an entry titled Notes on Gardening, Part 913. It was written by a gardener named Ang and published on June 10th, 2026.
Just pause on that for a second. Part 913.
Right, that's a lot of notes.
That number alone tells you we are dealing with someone who has been carefully observing, documenting, and interacting with their environment for a very long time. There is a deep well of patience and methodology there that you really only get from years of trial and error in the dirt.
Okay, let's unpack this because our mission today is to take this single, seemingly simple field note about a plant called the porcupine flower. The botanical name is Barleria lupulina, and extract a surprisingly profound lesson from it.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a gardening story.
Right. This isn't just a story about a gardener finding a weed. It is a masterclass in curation, the hidden power of constraints, and mastering the fine art of appreciating things without actually needing to own them.
Which is so hard to do.
So hard. But before we can understand why Ang made this somewhat shocking decision to just walk away from this plant, we have to look at what they actually found out there in the wild.
Context is everything here. Because the narrative of this discovery is quite telling, mostly because it begins with a failure.
A failure.
Yeah, Ang is out on a field trip, and right up front, they admit that they didn't manage to find the intended target of the trip. The plant they went out specifically looking for just completely eluded them.
Which is such a universal scenario. You go to the grocery store for milk, they're sold out, but you come home with an artisanal cheese you've never seen before.
Exactly, the accidental discovery.
Right. But in Ang's case, while wandering around, probably feeling a bit frustrated about missing the target, they stumble upon this entirely unexpected species. And Ang includes photos in the post, so we get a really vivid physical description of this porcupine flower.
And it's quite a looker.
It is. It is highly distinctive. It has these bright yellow spine-like bracts.
Right. And to give that some botanical context for you, a bract is basically a modified or specialized leaf.
Oh, so it's not the petal.
No, not at all. In many plants, the bracts are actually much more brightly colored and prominent than the true flowers themselves. Think of a poinsettia around the holidays.
Oh, the giant red leaves.
Yes, exactly. Those massive red parts are actually leaves, bracts, not petals. So this porcupine flower has these striking, spiky golden yellow structures that look like a cluster of sharp spines.
It sounds aggressive, but undeniably beautiful. And then emerging right from the center of these golden, spiky structures is the actual bloom, which Ang describes as a tubular white flower.
And this is exactly where the physical reality of the plant crashes headfirst into the expectation of the discoverer.
Oh, yeah. Looking at the photos in the post, my immediate thought is that this plant is like a movie with an absolutely incredible, flashy, multi-million-dollar trailer.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Right. The trailer promises explosions and high-stakes drama. That's the yellow, spine-like bracts. It's pulling you in, saying, look how bold and dangerous I am.
But then you go to the theater.
Exactly. You sit down in the theater, the movie actually starts, and it's just like two people whispering in a diner for 2 hours. It's a completely disappointing ending. That's the tubular white flower.
What's fascinating here is the biological mechanism behind your movie trailer analogy, because it is mathematically perfect.
Wait, how so?
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, producing true flowers with massive, fragrant petals requires immense resources. We're talking sugars, water, really specific nutrients.
It's expensive for the plant.
Very expensive. Bracts, however, being modified leaves, just rely on the plant's baseline vegetative growth. Slapping some yellow pigment on a modified leaf is metabolically cheap compared to building a complex floral structure.
Oh, wow. So it's literally an evolutionary trick.
It is. It's a trick to lure pollinators from a distance without spending too much metabolic energy on a giant, fragile bloom.
Yeah.
It literally is a cheap marketing campaign for a low-budget movie.
I love that. The plant is basically running a botanical scam. And Aang's reaction to this visual letdown is incredibly candid. I mean, they describe the actual bloom as lackluster.
Yeah, that word carries a lot of weight.
It does. And that lackluster quality completely kills their motivation to pursue or collect the plant. They judge the entire botanical package by the ultimate payoff, the bloom, rather than finding value in the unique protective structures or the dramatic buildup.
But we do that constantly in our own lives, don't we? Judging a whole experience by the final 5 minutes.
Oh, for sure. If the dessert at a restaurant is bad, it retroactively ruins the amazing appetizer.
Exactly. But Aang's post reveals that the lackluster bloom wasn't the only reason they left the porcupine flower behind.
Right, the plot thickens.
It does. The narrative pivots from the aesthetic disappointment of the plant to the logistical constraints of the environment. Aang states clearly that they are currently running out of space for adding new plants to their collection.
And it isn't just general space. The blog specifically mentions they're running out of gardening areas that get full sun.
And this introduces the concept of microclimates.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, a gardener can't just shove a sun-loving plant into a dark, damp corner and expect it to thrive, right? Aang explicitly mentions the need to find ways to cater to these different microclimates, as well as aligning any new acquisitions with their own established gardening styles.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but I have to admit I'm a bit stuck here.
Why is that?
Well, as someone who loves to collect things, reading that Aang had absolutely no full sun space left just made me feel a sense of pity. Yeah. It feels like a defeat. You find something new out in the world, but your environment just says no. How is being physically restricted like that a good thing? I mean, without these constraints, wouldn't they just be able to build a bigger, better collection? Isn't a microclimate essentially a natural editor? Without a lack of full sun, wouldn't Aang's garden just become a chaotic, overgrown jungle?
Consider the alternative, though. When you have infinite space and infinite resources, you don't have to make choices. You just accumulate blindly.
Okay, I can see that.
And neurologically speaking, having infinite choices leads to intense decision fatigue. Your brain becomes completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of management required. Constraints actually liberate the brain from the burden of choice.
Oh, that is a really good point.
Right. When you only have 1 square foot of full sun real estate left, that space becomes sacred. A microclimate isn't just a temperature reading. It's a hyper-local environment with rigid rules. A gardener must respect those rules rather than forcing their own will onto the landscape.
The constraint forces intentionality. I suppose you can't negotiate with a shadow.
You really can't. You cannot argue with poor soil drainage, and you cannot debate a lack of sunlight. You just have to work within the reality of the space. And think about how this applies to you, the listener, in your daily life.
How so?
Well, we all have our own personal microclimates. We have a limited amount of time in the day, a finite reserve of emotional energy, and specific cognitive boundaries.
Oh, wow. So your emotional bandwidth is a microclimate.
It is the most important microclimate you have.
Yeah.
Trying to cram every new hobby, every new commitment, or every piece of breaking news into your life is like trying to plant a sun-loving porcupine flower in a tiny shaded corner of a crowded garden.
It's just not going to work.
It won't thrive, it will slowly wither, and it will probably damage the healthy things you've already planted around it. Acknowledging our personal microclimates is the ultimate defense mechanism against burnout.
It really is.
It forces us to stop and ask, does this new thing actually fit the environment I have available to sustain it?
This raises an important question, though. If we accept that our space is limited and we accept that our energy is finite, how do we handle the psychological letdown of having to walk away from something we genuinely find fascinating?
That's the hard part.
Because Aang didn't just casually leave this plant. The text gives us a glimpse into a profound mental shift right there in the field.
Yes, Aang notes that it had been quite some moons since they had spotted a new plant species.
Quite some moons. That phrasing alone implies a long, quiet wait. It shows that Aang isn't out there tripping over new discoveries every single day. The novelty is incredibly rare for them.
And novelty being rare is what makes the instinct to hoard it so overpowering.
Right.
When you haven't seen something new in months, your primitive brain screams at you to capture it. But instead of giving in to that dopamine loop we discussed earlier, Aang arrives at this incredibly profound realization.
What do they say?
They write, while we don't need to get every single one of them, it's nice to know about them.
So what does this all mean? When I read that line, it's nice to know about them, I immediately mapped it onto how you and I consume information in the digital age.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Think about it. You are scrolling through a feed and you see 10 different articles about fascinating topics. Artificial intelligence, ancient history, a new recipe, a deep dive into astrophysics. The old instinct, the accumulation instinct says, I need to read all of these. I need to open 10 tabs, save them to an app, memorize the facts, and effectively own this knowledge.
Let's look at the mechanism of what happens to those 10 open tabs, though.
They just sit there.
They sit there at the top of your browser. They become digital clutter, which rapidly turns into a source of low-level anxiety. In psychology, there is something called the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect.
Yeah, it is named after Bluma Zeigarnik, a psychologist in the 1920s. She noticed that restaurant waiters could remember incredibly complex orders perfectly, right up until the moment the customer paid the bill.
Oh, really? And then what happened?
The second the transaction was complete, the waiters forgot the order entirely.
Because the loop was closed in their brains?
Yes. The Zeigarnik effect dictates that our brains fixate on uncompleted tasks. Those 10 open browser tabs are unpaid neurological bills.
Wow. Unpaid neurological bills. I feel called out.
We all do. Your brain constantly reminds you that you haven't finished them, consuming your cognitive load and generating stress. Every time you save something to read later, you are planting a seed in a mental garden that doesn't have the microclimate to support it.
I hear the philosophical beauty in that. I really do. But let me push back a little here.
Yeah.
If I see an amazing piece of art or a brilliant new concept, and I just leave it there because I, quote, don't have the microclimate for it, isn't that just settling? How do you distinguish between appreciating from afar and just giving up because the logistics are too hard?
That's a fair question. But giving up implies you wanted it and were thwarted by circumstances, leaving you with resentment.
Okay, true.
What Aang is describing is a fundamental shift in where the value lies. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Aang is providing us with a masterclass in emotional regulation.
Emotional regulation.
Yes, it is the conscious shift from a mindset of accumulation to a mindset of appreciation. The joy for Aang is no longer wrapped up in possession. The completion of the loop isn't ownership. The completion is the observation.
Oh, the encounter itself is the entire experience.
Exactly. They don't feel like they settled because simply observing the porcupine flower was the whole point.
That distinction changes everything. You appreciate the headline, you admire the intellectual yellow spines of the concept, and you keep scrolling. You only actually click on and read the one article that fits your mental microclimate for that specific day.
Precisely. Aang concludes that the goal is only to acquire the few plants that perfectly suit their garden. Everything else can just exist in the world unowned.
And notice how this mindset protects their enthusiasm.
What do you mean?
Well, the post ends with genuine anticipation for future discoveries. They note that if the weather continues to be great, which they specify means sunny days without major downpours, they expect to post more about new plant discoveries soon.
Yes. The anticipation is completely untouched by the burden of ownership.
Which is beautiful.
If you fill your entire life or your entire garden with things you acquired just because they looked interesting in the moment, you leave no room for the things that actually belong there. You leave no room to enjoy the sunny days because you are too busy managing the chaos of your own accumulation.
You become a manager of inventory rather than an explorer.
Exactly.
It's the difference between visiting a museum and trying to buy the museum.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. You can walk through a gallery, look at a massive, beautiful painting, and feel deeply moved by it. You can let the colors and the history wash over you, but you don't immediately call a contractor to knock down the walls of your house so you can hang it in your kitchen.
No, you let it stay in the museum.
Exactly. It serves its purpose there, and you walk out into the fresh air feeling inspired.
Aang treated the field trip like a museum visit. The Porcupine Flower was an exhibit, a fascinating one, an exhibit with a metabolically cheap marketing campaign and a lackluster ending, perhaps, but an exhibit nonetheless. It was allowed to just be an experience.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We started this deep dive looking at a single blog post, part 913, from a gardener who went out looking for a specific plant and failed to find it.
The happy accident.
Right, but through their eyes, we encountered the unexpected porcupine flower with its aggressive, flashy yellow bracts and its surprisingly tubular white bloom. We explored the evolutionary tricks behind that flashy display and walked through the physical realities of a gardener running out of full-sun real estate.
And most importantly, we uncovered how those hard constraints, those microclimates, actually liberate us from decision fatigue and the anxiety of the Zeigarnik effect.
Yes, we traced a very quiet but profound mental journey today. The transition from the frustration of limited space and lackluster blooms to the liberating philosophy that we can encounter the world, appreciate its immense variety, and simply walk away without needing to claim ownership of it.
It's a huge perspective shift.
It is such a vital lesson for all of us navigating this era of infinite abundance. Because whether you are literally trying to build a garden in your backyard, or you are trying to curate a digital library of reading material, or honestly, if you are just trying to manage the endless, relentless influx of your daily email inbox, Aang's philosophy holds up.
It applies to everything.
Taking an honest inventory of your personal microclimates and matching your acquisitions to your actual emotional and physical bandwidth is the ultimate defense against feeling completely overwhelmed by the world. You do not have to own every beautiful or interesting thing you see. It is perfectly fine and incredibly freeing to just say, it's nice to know about them.
In a world that constantly pushes our evolutionary buttons, demanding we capture and hoard every shiny object we come across, what might happen if you treated your own life like a field trip? What is one thing you can simply admire today? Leave exactly where you found it and walk away feeling richer just for having known it exists.